Hello and welcome to our webinar From Austria to Singapore and Back, how to internationalize in terms of travel restrictions and social distancing. My name is Lisa Stöger and I'm the program manager of the Global Incubator Network Austria. And together with Advantage Austria Singapore, we are hosting today's event where we will discuss how startups have to change their expansion plans and how they prepare to expand to new markets. So Ramin Mousavi, Technology Innovation Officer from Advantage Austria Singapore, is with me today, and he will tell you what we are going to do in the next 60 minutes.
Sorry, just unmute myself. Hi, good morning to everyone in Austria. My name is Ramin. I am the Innovation and Technology Officer at AußenwirtschaftsCenter Singapore. And I'm excited to welcome you all today. We are very blessed to have some very exciting speakers and very informed and qualified speakers with us today. First of all, we will hear from Chern. He is the Senior Associate Director at NUS Enterprise, who Jin and ourselves at Singapore have cooperated with before for our Go Singapore incubation program. And second, we have Jodi Lee from SG Innovate with us today, who will be telling us about SG Innovate's work, especially in the deep tech sector. I'm not going to say too much about SG Innovate. It's a very exciting and unique Singaporean institution that Jodi Lee can present much better than I can, but I certainly look forward to her presentation. And then we will follow it up with a discussion with Digby Ross and Adrian Ang, who Digby is from an Austrian company called Kompany, and Adrian is from a Singaporean startup called aevice Health, who have made the journey from Austria to Singapore and Singapore to Austria over the last couple of years, respectively, and we'll be sharing about the differences and the similarities in their experiences and how they have managed to expand and innovate during these trying times. And then this will be followed up by a Q&A where all the participants, all of you guys can ask your questions, and we will do our best to answer them, or the speakers will do their best to answer that. Just a couple of points. I mean, we've all been doing webinars for the past almost 2 years now, but as always, keep your microphones muted. If you have any questions, post them in the chat. And if you want to watch it back or share the webinar later, it is being recorded and will be published. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Chern already to tell us about his experiences in the last couple of years.
Okay, thank you, Ramin. Thank you again for the invitation. Hello, everyone. Can I share a couple of slides? Let me just. I guess prefer to spend more time for you all to ask questions. I guess that'll be more beneficial. So just a very quick. Are you able to see my slides? No.
You just have to switch to the full screen. Exactly.
Okay, sorry. Oh my God.
Yes, just a second.
Okay, cool. Whoops. Sorry, yeah. Just a quick intro of myself and who we are, what we do. So my name is Chern. That's what Ramin mentioned. Part of NUS Enterprise. We are from we're the entrepreneurship arm of the university. So anything that's related to innovations and entrepreneurship, that's managed by us. So we started this project, Blocks Anyone, in 2011. Back then, the Singapore startup ecosystem was fairly nascent. So the university wanted to do an experiment to see by creating a startup hub, can we actually help capitalize the industry? So we partnered with the government at the time, and together that was the birth of Blocks Anyone. And very quickly, to our surprise, it became very vibrant. Today is one of the largest consolidation of tech startup community in Singapore. Any one time, there's about 800 to 1,000 startups in the area. It's about 50 VCs, incubator accelerators, all within the community. And then in 2015, we have taken this international. Today we are in US, China, 3 locations in Indonesia, Vietnam, Japan, and so on. And if not for COVID, the mandate from the university is actually to bring this to more nodes. Essentially, what we are hoping to do is to create a global community. That way, when a startup joins us in any of our nodes, they can tap into resources from around the world. As a matter of fact, during this pandemic, that actually helps our community, because with our international footprint, we were actually able to help our startups to tap on the various resources around the world. Now, quickly jumping to the topic for the day, which I understand I was asked about the impact of the COVID-19 on the Singapore tech startup ecosystem. So these are some of the observations, at least from my end. So when it first COVID-19 first hit us, naturally, I think globally everyone was affected, right? There was a lot of uncertainty, and particularly with the travel restrictions that affected quite a number of the industries. But I would say as it started to settle, the impact seems to be mixed across different sectors. Obviously, the key sectors like travel industries, hospitalities, or even the retail and F&B, or rather companies serving these industries are worst hit because of the travel restrictions as well as the lockdowns in that sense. But there were actually companies that were doing well as a result. So the impact seems mixed. And in 2011, it was interesting though. It seems to be, so a couple of observations. One, the liquidity this year seems stronger for some reason. So actually quite a number of our startups are actually doing quite well. I think even the latest data from Enterprise Singapore states that I think this year for the first 9 months, it was about the total funding raised by the tech startups was about 11 billion, about twice that of last year, indicating there's already a recovery in the ecosystem. But also even within our own portfolios, this year, our cohort, I think about 90% of them actually managed to raise pre-A or A. So quite a bumper year for the startups. Even as a matter of fact, for us, for Block Science Singapore alone, we produced 4 unicorns this year. So again, it's some indications that the liquidity is quite strong. Even feedback from the investment community seems to suggest that there are a lot more competition now in the market, a lot of money. So, but a lot of money, but shortage of good startups or deal flows in a sense. So that's one observation, which is a strong liquidity. Yeah. The second observation is that there seems to be an acceleration of tech adoption. So with COVID-19, that have actually encouraged quite a lot of the businesses to adopt technology, which is why, as I mentioned earlier, right, the impact for the ecosystem has been mixed. There are startups who are actually benefiting as a result of COVID, because as feedback from the startups, many of the businesses, because of the restrictions, right? For instance, the reduction of in-person interactions, many now has to turn to technology to limit that interactions. Or even in the areas like commerce, businesses are now quickly trying to scramble into e-commerce or platforms so that they can switch to digital solutions in that sense, in order to adapt to the new norm. So that actually accelerated the adoptions of technology by the startup community. The other factor is also because of the border restrictions, right? As travel is now restricted, less foreign workers are now able to come into the country. So as a result, businesses are now trying to automate some of the workflow, especially the repetitive or mundane functions, where traditionally these are done by or lower skilled workers. So they try to replace that with digital solutions. So that's the second factor. And then the thirdly is also because of the government push. So as part of this whole effort, the government is also putting a lot of incentive for the industries to adopt technology. So combined together, that actually helped push a lot more, or encourage the industries to adopt more technology. So all in all, actually, from our observation, at least from the business side, the COVID seems to have some merits or at least positive for most or part of our tech startups. And finally, that's it. The uncertainty remains. So like earlier in the year, the country was already preparing to open up with the stabilization of the numbers, right? But as we know, shortly after the Delta variant came, and again, we went into heightened alert. And as of now, the country is actually trying to prepare to ease. But again, as we all know, there's a new variant that's now in that's creating concern. So again, the point here is we're not sure. There's a lot of uncertainty moving forward as the country is trying to ease back to norm. Uncertainty remains. Yeah. So broadly, I would say those are the overview or observation I have on the impact of COVID-19 on the tech startup ecosystem. Happy to share more if you have any specific questions. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I can pass the time to the next speaker.
Yeah, so I guess I will now share my screen if you don't mind, Lisa. Just let me pull my deck up. Okay, I hope everyone is able to see my screen. All right, so hi everyone. Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's session. And I would like to give my thanks to both Ramin and Lisa for inviting SG Innovate to give our sharing on how we can actually drive innovation through our work here. So my name is Jodi. I am from SG Innovate's Community and Partnerships team. And for those of you who may be more new to us, SG Innovate is a Singapore government-owned organization that invests in and helps build deep tech startups, talent, and community. So to share a bit more about what we do at SG Innovate, our mandate is to help Singapore commercialize and build deep tech startups across various industries. And our mission is to help research scientists build and scale their solutions from Singapore that have strong and impactful potential to solve some of the world's most pressing global challenges. So how we do so is we focus our various efforts through our talent, investments, and community building functions. And to date, we've invested in over 80 companies locally and overseas, including some startups from UK, US, and India, with a total of about 50 million invested with 700 million follow-on investments. And we also have Singapore's only deep tech career and skills development platform and the fastest growing deep tech community in Singapore, over 68,000 strong. So I also like to share a bit about some of our key focal areas at SG Innovate. So we focus a lot on deep technology, and we look specifically at the emerging technologies in the following areas of advanced manufacturing, agri-food, sustainability, health and biomedical sciences, and of course also artificial intelligence, autonomous tech, cybersecurity, and quantum computing. So I'd now like to share a bit more about what we at the Community and Partnerships team specifically do and how our work helps to build the deep tech innovation ecosystem. So as shared earlier, we are the largest and fastest growing deep tech community in Singapore with over 68,000 people in our network. We also have a database of over 4,000 PhDs and 100 plus partners, as well as having conducted around 600 over deep tech events as of June this year. So our main purpose is to help to grow Singapore's deep tech economy through our knowledge sharing conversations and collaborations among corporate startups, researchers, venture builders, government, as well as international partners. And we try to focus our applications of science and tech for the future economy. So this slide is just an example and also a snapshot of our network, which consists of a good mix of corporate partners, international developmental partners, research, innovation, enterprise, as well as government ecosystem partners that we continue to work very closely with to reach our objectives of establishing thought leadership through emerging technology, bridging startups together with corporates, as well as expanding our international network. So for example, under corporate partners, we work very closely with the likes of Infineon, as well as Singtel. And for the international development partners, we're also very close to our friends at the UNDP Global Center, ADB Ventures, as well as World Economic Forum. And for the research, innovation, and enterprise ecosystem partners, we work very closely with the Institutes of Higher Learning in Singapore, as well as overseas. So for example, we work very closely with the teams at NTU, as well as NUS in Singapore. And then lastly, of course, we keep close relationships with our government ecosystem partners, such as the likes of Enterprise Singapore, Economic Development Board, as well as A-STAR. So these are just some examples of the knowledge sharing community events that we hold very regularly at SG Innovate. I'm not sure if any of you have attended our sessions before, but as shared earlier, we conduct regular events across our focal areas, and our aim is really to build the communities as well as bring about different topics that are up and coming in the different sectors. For example, we have regular events, food, health and biomedical sciences, sustainability, as well as advanced manufacturing. And we have also connected international startups with the region through our community events with international partners. And the shift to online events as a result of the pandemic has also actually given us a lot more opportunities to engage with the international ecosystem as well as our partners. And beyond community events, at SG Innovate, we also launched our Deep Tech for Good initiative last year, which aims to gather experts in science and tech and entrepreneurship to help to catalyze collaborations across the ecosystem partners to advance deep tech developments for social and economic good. And we also have notable activities such as signature events like our AI for Good session, where we invited Professor Yoshua Benjo as well as Dr. Kai-Fu Lee. And apart from that, we also have leader interview series like the Digital Feed podcast, which focuses on agri-food innovations. And we also work very closely with external innovation challenges, such as the Extreme Tech Challenge in Singapore, to help connect corporates and startups together as well. And I think I also like to introduce this, which is one of our newest initiatives at SG Innovate. So this year, we actually launched our open innovation platform with the aim to try and bridge the gap between corporates and startups to achieve the main outcome of partnerships and commercial opportunities for deep tech startups across various sectors. So within this year to date, we have held 2 of such reverse pitches as part of our open innovation work, where we invited a total of 7 corporate partners across advanced manufacturing as well as supply chain and logistics respectively to present a total of 18 problem statements to startups. And these opportunities that we present to startups are also not limited to only those that are based in Singapore, as well as given the new way we are working now, we also see that corporates are typically more open to work remotely with startups that are based overseas as well. So I think what I've shared in my earlier part of the presentation is really our working community, but also we do have other functions such as talent investment. So I'll now like to share a little bit about what we focus on in terms of talent building and networking. So we do have a dedicated talent team that looks after our talent marketplace, which aims to connect deep tech talents and startups. And we also have talent programs in place that help to match talent at all levels, as well as talent development to help with deep tech reskilling for those who, for example, have a mid-career switch and are looking to find a new job in the deep tech sector. And beyond that, we also have our investments team, which comprises of extensive experiences across various domains and is uniquely positioned to not only make sound investments, but also tap on our vast networks to help our portfolio companies succeed. So I think I've also shared a bit about it in one of my earlier slides, but we also invest locally and globally in promising early stage deep tech startups from seed to Series B rounds, and we focus typically on emerging technologies. Yeah, so I wanted to keep this short so that we don't run against time, but really happy to come to the end of my presentation. And I hope that through my sharing, everyone has a better understanding of our work in driving innovation at SG Innovate. And I think if any of you are in the deep tech space and domain, please also be very welcome to join our activities at SG Innovate. And I'd now like to pass the time perhaps back to Lisa or Ramin for the remaining program. But thank you so much for giving me a chance to share about our work here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jodi. And for anyone that has never attended one of SG Innovate's events, as someone who has been to many of them, both virtually and in person, I can highly recommend them. They're always very, very interesting, very engaging. Always some good takeaways there. So do check them out. They're all free and well worth a look. Thank you, Jodi.
Thank you.
And I'll hand over to Lisa to present the moderated discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Ramin. Thank you very much to NUS Enterprise and SG Innovate for their insights, and happy to have them in our network, and looking forward to cooperating with you in the future. So let's move to our startup experience exchange. So we have two startups from our GIN network here today. On the one hand, we have our Go Singapore alumnus kompany, and Digby Ross, Business Development Director for Asia Pacific, is here with us. And then our Go Austria alumnus, aevice Health, we have the CEO, Adrian Ang, here with us today. So expansion during a pandemic is definitely not easy, and nobody has thought of that the pandemic will last for so long. But we are happy to share some experience today, how we still can try out expansion strategies and still enter new markets, although we have to cope with travel restrictions and social distancing measurements. Before we get your experience insights, I'd like to give first the hand over to Digby to just introduce yourself and what actually kompany is about.
Yes, thank you, Lisa, and good morning, everyone. Guten Morgen, Österreich, and good afternoon, Singapore, and pleasure to be here today. Kompany with a K. We are the world's leading regulatory technology, or RegTech platform, for business KYC, know your customer or know your business. So what we do fundamentally is we connect to as many official government registers of companies around the world as we possibly can. So the Firmenbuch in Austria, and ACRA in Singapore, and then 200 plus other official government registers around the world. The primary use case is banks. Banks are our customers primarily, and it's for banks who are onboarding a new business as a customer. And banks are faced with regulation, which is tightening around the world to fight against financial crime, money laundering, terrorist financing. So they are required to know who they are doing business with and who are the ultimate beneficial owners, the individuals that own and control that company. So through us, they are able to access all of these company registers around the world to understand who are the individuals who actually own and control these companies that they are taking on as customers. And that is so that they can comply with anti-money laundering legislation, counter-terrorist financing legislation, and help fight financial crime around the world. So that's enough from me. I think I'll hand over to my other person on the panel.
Exactly. So Adrian, can you just explain what is aevice Health doing and just some words about yourself?
Right. Thanks, Lisa, and thanks, Digby. Thanks for having me over here today as well. My name is Adrian. I'm from aevice Health, Singapore. So just a very brief introduction about my company. I myself grew up with chronic asthma when I was very young and has been in and out of the hospital rather often. And that inspired me and my team to start aevice Health back in 2018, where we built wearable medical devices for patients with chronic respiratory diseases. And what this device could do is it helps doctors to monitor a patient's lung disease to see if the treatment is appropriate for them, if they need to titrate the medications accordingly, just so that we can achieve a good outcome for the patients overall. So I was part of the Go Austria program just last month. So that is where I came back from Austria, Vienna, before the lockdown, and met quite a lot of friends over there from Korea, as well as in Singapore who were there, as well as virtual friends based in Singapore as well. So I'm really happy to be here to share a little bit more about traveling during this period of time, and feel free to ask any questions if you're keen. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, this is a good reminder. So for any questions, please use the chat icon, and we will address the questions right to Adrian, Digby. Okay, let's start with our first question. Adrian, you already mentioned it. You participated in the Go Austria Fall 2021 acceleration program. So you just started your expansion to Austria and the European market. How have you prepared for this expansion, especially overseas expansion during the pandemic? Was there something you had to focus on more intensely because due to the current situation? So how have you prepared for the expansion?
To be really honest, we are just about getting into two main markets right now, Japan and the US, and we are always looking into the European market, and that is why I actually joined and took up the Go Austria program. It is actually the first time that I travel in more than 1.5 years since COVID started, and I didn't expect myself to be traveling. The very first place was to Vienna, to Austria. It wasn't as intimidating as I thought it would. It was a lot more easy to travel, to be very honest. I was expecting that the custom officer, for example, at the Vienna airport is going to take out the stack of my documents, check through every single thing, ask me a lot of questions. And the same thing when I travel within Europe and back to Singapore. Turns out there was a lot more checking in Singapore than than traveling to Europe. It was totally different experience for me. And with that, what's going to happen is that I started to actually see how we could actually plan people overseas from Q1 next year to strengthen the markets that we are already at and to explore new market. So I think that's what has changed us as a company, my mentality as well. And I'm looking forward to see how we can travel. And hopefully the Omicron is not too much to fear going forward. Yeah.
Yes, fingers crossed for that. So I think you came to Austria in a very, very good point in time. So speaking of good timing, Digby, you participated in our Go Singapore 2019 program. So this was already before the pandemic, and you traveled to Singapore to connect with the Singaporean ecosystem and connect and establish new connections. How has this changed over the last 1.5 years? So how do you stay in contact with your connections in Singapore, and how do you develop your expansion to Singapore?
Yes, good question. So that program now, the Go Singapore, that was 2 years ago. That was September to November 2019, before the world went crazy. And it was great. We were 2 months on the ground in Singapore, and we were really seeing that as the preparation for opening a physical office in Singapore, which is what we were planning to do last year. So to have those 2 months on the ground was great. It coincided at the end of the 2 months with the Singapore FinTech Festival, which, while we were still having events in the real world, was the largest FinTech convention in the world. So that was a nice culmination. We made a number of contacts during the program, as well as especially at the FinTech Festival. We started building some good relationships with the Monetary Authority of Singapore. So we were all set to go 2020 last year to open a physical office in Singapore. And then, of course, we all know what happened. As a result of what happened, the pandemic, we did actually change course a little bit, because one thing that I think has been clear over the last 1.5, 2 years is that the countries of the Asia Pacific region generally, from Japan to Australia to New Zealand to India, Singapore, Hong Kong especially, have remained much more tightly closed to outsiders than the countries of Europe and in the US. So it's meant that opening a physical office in Asia, it hasn't been the right time. We're really hoping that the region will open up a bit again before we open a physical office. So we kind of changed direction a little bit. We opened up an office in New York last year or early this year. And the next one will be APAC as soon as things open up again. So we're looking forward to that. We have nevertheless continued to build our business in APAC during that time. I'm based in Australia. I've been doing it all from my home office here. And I guess we're fortunate because we did have that opportunity to travel to Singapore and other countries in Asia before the pandemic. So certain relationships had already been started. So we were able to continue many of those relationships. But on top of that, we have created some really nice business totally in the virtual world as well. So it's really been a mix. And I think everyone, especially in Asia, has been very understanding that people can't travel at the moment. So people are sympathetic. People are adjusted to the Zoom calls and the Microsoft Team calls very quickly. And that has become the new way of doing business. I hope not forever. I hope we do get a chance to travel next year. But for the time being, things have been going okay.
Okay, good to hear. Yes, let's talk about the virtual versus physical connections and how to get in contact and establish new connections. So you say, Digby, that there is understanding for not traveling and it is possible to do business just on virtual basis. However, how do you estimate it that it is still important to have physical presence in a new market and also to be present physically to accelerate basically your connections?
Yeah, definitely. Having that physical connection with someone, it always helps, and especially in Asia, I think that's especially valued. Although it is all over the world, but yes, so certainly looking forward to the travel coming back, and I think once we do have that opportunity, I think it will be expected that you make that effort to travel. Yeah, I think we all appreciate that. That's definitely the way to go, if possible.
Yes, definitely. Adrian, what is your point of view on that, especially after you established some connections in Austria physically? How do you follow up with them? What's your experience on that?
I had the conception that when COVID started and we were all moving to virtual, I used to think that potentially we could have virtual meetings which could build connections virtually. We could strengthen them as we go forward and start to move away from physical meeting and all. This time around, when I went to Austria, I also get to visit some of the countries around Europe, where we are speaking to some of the doctors as well as prospective partners. I had the opportunity to meet them in person. I can say that that connections with them, just having a coffee or as simple as having a meeting in their hospital, cannot replace a virtual meeting, a virtual connection. And that's my sensing. And I'm very glad that things that could easily take me about 2 to 3 meetings in the past, virtual meetings, could easily achieve in a meeting with them virtually. And I think that it all goes down to trust. It goes down to that relationship that you have to build with the person when you see the person. And that's probably my takeaway from this trip in Austria. And probably I should add on as well to say that even though the Go Austria program was about 2 weeks long this time, I actually stayed in Europe for 4 weeks. So I actually got to travel as far up into the UK, where we have some research and development going on over there as well, to meet some of the people. So I thought it's actually a very good time for me to be in Europe this time. Very good timing as well. So that's my takeaway.
Okay.
Lisa, just to add to what
sure.
Adrian said there, I'm certainly looking forward to getting back to Singapore and back to Asia. I'm hoping it'll be about April or May of 2022. I have this feeling that it's going to be the mother of all business trips, because there's going to be old friends like Ramin and Chern that I spent a lot of time with 2 years ago. I have to catch up with all of the old friends, but then I've made all of these new friends in the last 2 years. I'm going to have to meet them as well. So it's going to be super intense. It's going to be super fun. And I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be amazing.
Yes, it will be busy. busy to
sure.
maintain the old connections and to actually meet the new connections in person. Yes, trust and relationship is definitely two very important aspects of building new connections. Let's talk about the topic, how you prepare to expand to new markets. When you evaluate new markets, do you actually take into account the current COVID situation? So Digby, you already mentioned that you started thinking of having a physical presence in Singapore, and then you changed or let it sit and started in New York. So is the COVID situation something you take into account when evaluating new markets and do your research on new markets? How do you cope with that?
Definitely at the moment. And what I'm looking for is really kind of just like 3 to 6 months of consistency from a particular place where you can have confidence that you're going to be able to travel there, move around the city or the country and be able to travel home again without encountering any kind of change in rules along the way. So that's what we're really looking for. And as I said before, I think that the countries of APAC have remained a lot more closed than Europe and the US, where I believe people are moving around much more freely than they are here in the APAC region. So when we start to see that consistency from Singapore at one end, from Australia at the other end, then I think that will be the time to start thinking about a physical office once again, because that freedom of movement is a very important thing. When you open up a new office on a new continent, that first office that you open up, that's your base. That's where you want to be having someone, and that someone then needs to be traveling to Hong Kong, to Australia, to Japan, to China, to India. If you can't move about freely, then what's the point of having a physical office, unless it's maybe for some other reason like tax or whatever. But yes, that's what we're looking for, just some consistency so that we know we can come and go and use it as a base to be able to travel to other places.
Adrian, would you agree on that? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think Digby actually nailed it, and that pretty much we have the same sentiment. I think one of the things that he mentioned, which resonates very well with me, is the consistency in terms of how they manage the COVID situation. To give an example, if we were to travel to countries where the rules change all the time, it is very difficult to keep up, and the amount of documents, the amount of things to check is going to be intense. We rather only explore a market where things are consistent, where we know that things won't really change much. If we want to go in or get out of the country, we know exactly how to do so. I have we have about 2 people who are based in Korea for about 3 months now, and they are just coming back this week. And fortunately, in Korea, things haven't been changing much. I think they have been quite consistent with the rules until the Omicron came about, and I think that over the world, many places, there's new rules coming in. Singapore-wise, it seems like where we came from, the rules are consistent within the country, but traveling in and out, there seems to be some changes here and there. So that is one of the hassles that we have to keep up as well. But that's one of the key considerations that we had. I think the second point that probably personally that I find important is actually the access to healthcare, access to PCR tests and ART tests. This is one of the things that I personally felt it when I was traveling overseas. One of the concerns I had was if I were to, for example, contract COVID-19, where should I go? How do I go? How do I even know if I'm contracted a COVID-19? I had with me about I think 7 ART kit or 7 I think the UK they call it rapid anti-flow kit, lateral flow kit with me when I was traveling overseas. It was so difficult for me to actually find places for me to purchase it. But thankfully in Austria, I think PCR test, ART test is free. You can just go anywhere, down the streets, look for the nearest centers. You can do the test as and when you want. So I think that is one of the other criteria that we actually look up for: easily accessible healthcare, as well as places that we know we can do PCR, ART tests quite easily.
Mm-hmm. Definitely agree on that. I would like to have a look into the future. We are all no health experts and we can't predict predict how 2022 will look like, especially regarding travel restrictions, but how do you both prepare for further expansion? Do you need more resources, especially human resources, to prepare some expansion strategies for new markets? And how do you think you can focus on in 2022? On which markets can you focus on? Will you invest more time into new markets? Do you try to keep up with your markets you are already have expanded to? What are your plans for 2022? Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk first. Yeah, look, I think the good thing about this kind of 1 or 2 year delay to opening up an Asia Pacific office is I think we're going to be more ready than ever when that time does come, because a lot of additional business has been built over the last 2 years. So I think we're kind of expecting a tidal wave to come quite soon. So it'll be a very opportune time to open up an office. I think in terms of resources, probably I think we'd be looking to have a good kind of young, energetic salesperson, local salesperson. That would probably be the first person that we would look at having. And then probably some kind of technical support, and also giving us that local language capability for that technical support. And that's where Singapore is really, a great place to be located, because there's so many different languages spoken in Singapore. We can easily find someone that can speak Chinese. We could find someone that speaks Indian languages, other languages. It's all there in Singapore, and of course a very high level of basically native English there as well. So those would be the first two things that we'd be looking at when we do set up an office in Singapore.
So I think for us, what we'll be looking at is we wouldn't be rapidly expanding into new markets for next year. We probably would want to focus on the markets that we are already in and see how best we could accelerate in terms of the partnerships as well as collaboration going forward. In terms of the people, one of the things that I find quite challenging during this period is to find the right person on board the team to push the company to greater heights. Particularly in Singapore, I feel that we are a very cosmopolitan country. We tend to have a lot of expats coming to Singapore and flying out of Singapore to travel to do work. For the last 2 years, I think there's quite a restrictions in terms of the talent that we see in Singapore. It is us competing against many other companies in terms of looking for engineers, looking for salespersons going forward to push the business to a new frontier. And these are exactly the kind of people that we will look for in next year, potentially in the countries that we're operating. So I think that's for us.
Okay, definitely all the best and good luck for 2022. And we're already coming to an end, but I have one last question. So I'd like to have one tip from both of you, or one piece of advice you would like to give other startups that actually maybe already aim to globally expand, and now feel a bit thrown back due to the pandemic. So what is your advice you want to give and to share that you stay motivated during this pandemic?
Who's going first? I'll go first. Yeah, look, I've probably got a few pieces of advice, to be honest, not just one, but I'd have to say,
okay. The more advice, the better.
A good product or service always speaks for itself. So, first and foremost, you've got to make sure that you've got something to offer that is going to be of interest to the place that you are wanting to expand to. I think you have to maintain your professionalism at all times, even on a video call. Sometimes things go wrong, but just show patience and treat any problems with a smile. I think it's important as well, whether it's in person or whether it's on video, you've got to always be warm, you've got to be open, you've got to be empathetic, you've got to be transparent. I think that genuine humanity will always shine through, whether that's in person or on a video call. If you're friendly, if you're likable, you're halfway there. And then also, you know, if you have any experience with the country that you're in or the country that you want to be going to, you know, share that with the other person. Share a story about the last trip that you took there or something you've read about the country. I think to show some genuine interest in the place that you're visiting or looking to expand to is very important, because people remember that. It's not just about business, it's about creating that personal connection as well.
I think, yeah, I think what works for me is that I probably won't have advice, but probably just suggestions and sharing in terms of what I feel work for me, that could work for everyone over here. What works for me is whenever I travel to a country and countries that we just started or we are trying to have more partnerships, we always look for someone in that countries that can bring us around, somebody that can actually help us to make some connections rather than to go on to knocking doors by ourselves. And that is much more efficient and more effective in terms of us getting to the door of the right people to get something work out. So that's what happened for me in Austria. That's what happened for me in the US and Japan as well. And if you're coming to Singapore, yeah, feel free to reach out to me or anyone over here that's based in Singapore. Happy to bring you to the right door if I can.
Thank you very much, Adrian and Digby, for your experience, sharings and exchange. I wish you all the best for 2022. And yeah, this was our small discussion on how to expand during travel restrictions and social distancing. And if you would like to get in touch with Adrian and Digby, we are happy to share their contact details and more about aevice Health and Kompany in the description box, so feel free to reach out. And if you think of expanding to the Asian markets or Austrian markets, you can apply for our outbound and inbound services of the Global Incubator Network Austria. So Go Austria is the acceleration programs for Asian startups that aim to enter the European markets towards Austria. And Go Asia is the acceleration program for Austrian startups that aim to enter selected markets in Asia. Those programs are customized and last for 1 to 2 weeks, and it is a kickstart into a new market where you can meet the local startup ecosystem. You will have individual business meetings, various pitch and networking opportunities, and the costs for those programs and travel costs are covered by Chern. So with this being said, thank you very much for joining us today, and all the best wherever you are, and looking forward to see your expansion stories and to follow your updates, and all the best from my side.